I asked when the wedding is, and my daughter-in-law said, "We got married yesterday." I still remember the sound of her voice that morning. So calm, so casual, as if she was talking about the weather. "I asked when the wedding is," I said, smiling through the phone, "so I can know what color to sew." And she said, "We got married yesterday." I froze. For a second, I thought I misheard her. Maybe she said, "We're getting married next Saturday." But no, she said it again, even lighter this time, like she was brushing crumbs off her lap. "Yes, Mama Grace. We did a small thing at the courthouse. Just us. Just us." Those two words hit me like thunder. I felt my hand shake as the phone slipped a little from my ear. I remember looking at the wall clock in my sitting room. It was 10:17 a.m. The same clock I bought the day my son graduated from university. My son, my only child. The same boy I carried for 9 months in a leaking roof apartment. The same child I used to bathe with rainwater because the tap had run dry. And now, he got married without me. I didn't say a word for a while. I just listened to her voice on the phone, floating like a stranger's. She was talking about something, how small the ceremony was, how pretty her dress looked, but all I could hear was silence in my heart. When she paused, I whispered, "Does he know you called?" And she said, "Oh yes, Mama. He's right here. We're just about to go for brunch." I could almost hear his laughter in the background. That same deep, warm laugh that used to light up my whole world. But this time it didn't sound the same. It sounded far away. I wanted to ask, "Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't he call? Was I not worthy to be there?" But my throat closed up. My tongue felt heavy, as if every word I could have said was buried under the weight of years of motherhood. So I just said, "All right. God bless your union." And I hung up. When I put the phone down, my hands were trembling. I stared at my small sitting room, the faded curtains, the old family photo on the wall. It was of me and him in his graduation gown, me in a borrowed lace blouse. We were smiling. I was holding his certificate, too proud to care that my shoes had holes underneath. Now, that same face had chosen a new life, a wife, and I was not part of it. I sat there, unable to move, as tears rolled down my cheeks. You know that kind of pain that doesn't scream, it just sits in your chest and burns slowly? That's what I felt. All I could think was, what did I do wrong? Did I love him too much? Did I protect him too fiercely? Did I raise him to forget me when the lights got bright? I tried to pray, but no words came. Only whispers of questions that no mother ever wants to ask. Maybe she didn't mean to sound cruel. Maybe she didn't even realize what she said. But the truth was clear. My son was now someone else's husband. And I wasn't even there to see it happen. I remember standing up slowly, walking to the window, and watching the rain fall. The sky looked heavy, like it was crying with me. I whispered, "Lord, if this is what motherhood means, teach me how to bear it." Because that day, something in me cracked. Not loud enough to break, but deep enough that I knew things would never be the same again. The next morning I woke up early and cooked rice. Old habits die hard. When he was young, every time there was good news, a scholarship, a promotion, anything, I cooked. So I cooked again that day. I set 2 plates on the table, then stopped and laughed bitterly. What was I doing? Who was I expecting? The food tasted of salt and tears. I couldn't eat. I packed it away, cleaned the dishes, and sat in silence. For the first time, my home felt empty. Not because no one was there, but because the person who filled it with life had walked into a new one. Without looking back, that's when I knew this wasn't just about a wedding. It was the beginning of something else. Something deeper. A distance I could no longer cross. Hey besties, take just a second to give this video a thumbs up and please subscribe so we can get to 1,000 subscribers. I'm sure you'll enjoy the story. So watch till the end, and tell us what you think in the comment section. My name is Grace Johnson, and I'm 63 years old. Born and raised in Birmingham, Alabama, back when neighbors still greeted each other from the porch, and a single mother could raise a child on faith and fried chicken. I didn't come from much. My mama cleaned white folks' houses for a living, and my daddy, well, he left before I learned to spell his name. So when I had my son, I promised myself, no matter what life threw at me, I'd never let him feel fatherless. I named him David. I used to joke that I didn't just give birth to him, I built him with my bare hands. From the day he was born, that boy had my whole heart. I worked 2 jobs, sometimes 3. Days at the diner, nights doing laundry at the nursing home. There were nights I came home so tired I'd just sit on the bed and stare at him sleeping, little legs tucked under the blanket, one hand open like he was already reaching for the world. He was my reason to keep breathing. When David turned 5, I bought him his first pair of church shoes, shiny black ones from the thrift store. They were one size too big, but I stuffed the toes with tissue paper. He strutted around that small apartment like he was already somebody. He'd say, "Mama, when I grow up, I'ma buy you a big house with white fences and a porch swing." And I'd laugh and say, "Just don't forget your mama when you get rich." He promised me he never would. When I think back now, those were the happiest days of my life, not because we had much, but because we had each other. Sunday mornings meant pancakes and gospel music. Evenings meant prayer by candlelight when the power bill was overdue. And every Christmas, even if all I could afford was a toy car from the dollar store, he acted like it was gold. That boy grew up grateful. Smart, respectful, gentle. He was the kind of child other mothers wished they had. I remember one winter, he came home with a letter from school, said he'd been chosen to represent the district in a math competition. I didn't have money for the trip, so I pawned my wedding ring. The same ring his father had left me. It didn't even hurt to let it go, because seeing David walk up that stage in his pressed shirt, holding that certificate, made me feel like I'd already won everything I ever prayed for. He went on to college, the first in our family. I packed him a small Bible, a few shirts, and the last $50 I had. He hugged me tight and whispered, "Mama, I'll make you proud." And he did. Every semester, he'd call and say, "Mama, I got straight A's." I'd sit on the porch with my radio, smiling so hard the neighbors would tease me. "Grace, that boy of yours gone be somebody big," they'd say. And I believed it. After graduation, he got a good job, technology, something about software. I never really understood the details, but I understood the pride in his voice. He moved to Atlanta, said it was for better opportunities. I cried the night he left, but I told him, "Go chase your dreams, baby. Just remember where home is." At first he did. He called every weekend, sent money. Sometimes he'd drive down for Mother's Day, bring groceries and flowers. He'd sit in the kitchen, telling me stories about the city, the lights, the people. I'd just listen, smiling, as I stirred the pot of gumbo. But slowly things began to change. It started small, a missed call here, a late reply there. Then 1 month turned into 3. When I called, it'd go straight to voicemail. And when he did answer, he always sounded rushed. "Work's been crazy, Mama. I'll call you back." Sometimes he did. Most times he didn't. I told myself not to take it personal. Young people get busy. But a mother can feel when her child's heart is drifting away. Then one Thanksgiving, he called and said he couldn't make it home. Said his boss needed him for a big project. I cooked anyway. Turkey, stuffing, sweet potato pie. I set 2 plates, just in case he changed his mind. He didn't. That night, I sat at the table alone, whispering grace to a room that felt too quiet. I told myself, it's all right. He's out there building his future. But deep down, something inside me ached. A few months later, he came home for the first time in nearly a year. He looked different, taller, sharper, confident. And he wasn't alone. He brought her. A beautiful light-skinned woman with straight hair and a diamond smile. He introduced her as Monica. "Mom, this is my girlfriend." I tried to be polite, welcoming. I offered food, asked her about her family, her job. She was kind enough, but there was something distant in her tone, the kind of politeness that comes with calculation. When I went to serve food, she said, "Oh, I don't eat fried things." I laughed lightly. "That's all we got down here, baby." She smiled, but didn't touch the plate. That night, I told David, "She's pretty. You seem happy." He smiled.
Yeah, Ma.
"She's special." I nodded, though something in my chest didn't settle right. There was a shadow in her eyes, not cruel, just cold, like someone who measured people by usefulness, not love. But I stayed quiet, because when a mother warns too soon, her child calls it jealousy. After that visit, things changed faster. He stopped calling me Mama. It became Ma. Then just Grace. At first, I thought I imagined it, until the day he said, "Grace, I'll send you the money later." Grace. The same name that used to sound like love from his lips now felt like a wall between us. The next time they came to visit, Monica didn't even get out of the car. She just waved through the window. He said she wasn't feeling well. I nodded, though it hurt. A few weeks later, he called and said they were moving to California. Said he got a promotion, a new life, new dreams. He promised he'd visit soon. I watched his old bedroom grow dusty, his pictures fade in the sunlight. But I still cleaned it every week, just in case. You never stop preparing for your child's return, even when you know it's not coming. And then months later I got that call. The one that shattered everything I thought I knew. The one where Monica told me, "We got married yesterday." That was when I realized it wasn't just distance keeping him away. It was choice. And a mother can live with distance, but choice will break you. After that phone call, days turned into weeks. Weeks into months. And silence became my new routine. I tried calling David several times, but he hardly answered. When he did, his voice sounded distant, like a man standing on the other side of a closed door. He'd say, "I'm busy, Mama. We're settling in. I'll call you back." But he never did. I stopped trying for a while. Not because I stopped caring, but because every unanswered ring tore another piece out of me. Instead, I started praying more. I told God, "I don't want to lose my son, Lord. I just want him to remember who he is." One afternoon, about 6 months later, I finally got a call from him. My heart jumped when I saw his name. He said, "Hey, Ma. I'm in town for a conference. Thought I'd stop by for a few minutes." I nearly dropped the phone. It had been almost a year since I'd seen his face. I swept the whole house that morning, polished the picture frames, and baked his favorite cornbread. When he walked in, I almost didn't recognize him. He wore a navy suit, expensive watch, and cologne that smelled like city money. I stood there, my hands still wet from washing dishes, just staring. He smiled and said, "You look good, Ma." But something about the way he said it made my stomach twist. There was a formality to it, like he wasn't talking to his mother, but to someone he once knew. He didn't sit long. He looked around the room, complimented the curtains, asked how I'd been. But his eyes kept darting to his phone. After about 15 minutes, he said, "Monica's waiting in the car." I nodded. "Bring her in." He hesitated. "She's on a call. Next time, Ma." Next time. That was his favorite phrase now, but next time never came. When he stood to leave, I gave him a small envelope. Inside was a photo of him at 5 years old, wearing those black thrift store shoes. I said, "Keep this, to remember where you came from." He looked at it briefly and smiled politely. "Thanks, Ma." He tucked it into his pocket like a receipt, hugged me quickly, and left. I watched his car pull away. It was black and shiny, the kind you only see in commercials. But as it disappeared down the street, I realized I wasn't proud. I was hollow. It's a strange kind of pain when the child you raised to reach the world forgets the hands that lifted him there. A few weeks later, I called him again. It was his birthday. I wanted to sing for him like I always did, off-key, but full of love. He picked up, but his tone was sharp. "Ma, I'm in a meeting. Can we talk later?" Just for a second, I said, smiling through the phone, "You're 30 now, David. I'm so proud of." He cut me off. "Ma, please. Not now." And then the line went dead. I sat there, phone pressed to my ear, staring at the kitchen wall. The same wall that once echoed his baby laughter now held nothing but silence. That night, I cried like I hadn't cried in years. Not loud, just quietly. Because mothers learn to cry without sound, so nobody else has to feel their pain. Months passed. I started hearing about his life through other people. My cousin's friend in Atlanta said she saw pictures online, David and Monica at fancy events, dressed like royalty. Another friend said they bought a house with a pool. I wasn't jealous. I just wondered why none of that joy ever reached me. Then one day, out of nowhere, I received a group text message. It was from Monica. She'd send out photos, their wedding pictures. They were smiling under a white arch, surrounded by friends. Her caption read, 6 months married to my best friend. Forever to go. 6 months. So they'd been married all this time, and no one thought to tell me. I stared at those photos for a long time. He looked happy. But I could see it, that slight stiffness in his smile. The kind you wear when you're not completely free. Still, I didn't say a word. I didn't text. Didn't call. I just prayed. The next year I got sick. It started as fatigue, then pain in my joints. Doctor said it was early arthritis, maybe stress. He told me to rest more. Rest. How do you rest when your heart never sleeps? One afternoon, while lying on the couch, I heard a knock on the door. When I opened it, I nearly gasped. It was Monica. She stood there, looking perfect as ever. Neat hair, gold earrings, and a look that could slice through steel. "Hi, Mama Grace," she said. "I was in town. Thought I should drop by." I smiled, though confusion twisted inside me.
Come in, dear.
She walked in, looked around, and said, "Nice place." I could tell she didn't mean it. Her eyes scanned the walls like she was searching for something to judge. I asked, "How's David?" She shrugged. "Busy. Work's been hectic." I nodded. "He doesn't call much these days." She smiled faintly. "He's trying his best. You know how men are." Her tone was polite, but sharp, like a teacher correcting a child. Then she said something that made my stomach tighten. "I think sometimes you expect too much from him. He's grown now. He needs space." I blinked, unsure I heard right. "Space? I'm his mother." "Yes," she said, crossing her arms, "but he has a family now. You can't keep calling every week. It stresses him out." I felt heat rise in my chest. "I raised that boy with everything I had," I said softly. "If a few calls stress him, then maybe you should ask what kind of man you married." Her eyes narrowed slightly, but she smiled again, the kind of smile that hides poison. "I just came to drop this off." She handed me an envelope. Inside was a check. $10,000. "What's this for?" I asked. She said, "David wanted to make sure you're taken care of. You can use it to fix the house, or maybe visit us someday." I stared at the check. It looked like help, but it felt like distance. "Tell David," I said quietly, "that his mama doesn't need payment to feel loved." She tilted her head. "It's not payment. It's appreciation." I smiled tightly. "Then tell him appreciation starts with a phone call." She looked around once more, as if she couldn't wait to leave. Then she said, "Take care, Mama Grace." And she walked out, heels clicking like punctuation marks on my heart. I didn't cash the check. I put it in a drawer and left it there. A month later, my neighbor, Miss Thelma, showed me something on Facebook. It was a post from Monica again. Her caption read, "Taking care of the woman who raised my husband. Family is everything." And attached was a photo, the check. My check. The same one I never touched. I felt my knees go weak. The world spun for a moment. She'd turned my dignity into content. My motherhood into her display of charity. That night, I sat on the porch and cried until the stars blurred. I whispered, "Lord, this can't be what motherhood is supposed to feel like." From that day, I pulled back. I stopped calling, stopped texting. I told myself, if he wants me, he knows where I am. But silence grew heavier. Then one morning, I got a letter in the mail. It was an invitation. Baby shower. They were expecting. I read that card over and over again. No personal note. No call. Just a printed card, like I was one of the guests. I decided not to go. Not out of anger, but out of self-respect. Weeks later, I saw pictures again, them holding a baby boy. He looked just like David when he was born. Same nose. Same eyes. I whispered, "That's my grandson." But I'd never held him, never heard his cry, never even received a call saying, "Mama, it's a boy." That was the moment I realized. I wasn't just left out of the wedding. I'd been erased. Bit by bit. Memory by memory. And it wasn't my son doing it alone. It was both of them. That's betrayal in its purest form. Not loud, not dramatic, just a quiet rewriting of love until you no longer exist in the story. The day everything finally came to light started like any other, quiet, slow, ordinary. I woke up before the sun, as I always did, made myself a cup of tea, and sat on the porch watching the sky turn from gray to gold. That morning, something told me to check my mail. I hadn't done that in a while. Most times, all I got were bills or church flyers. But when I opened that rusty old mailbox, there it was, a thick white envelope with David's handwriting on it. I froze. For a moment, I didn't even open it. My hands shook. My mind ran wild. Had something happened? Was he finally reaching out? I sat back down on the porch, tore it open slowly, and pulled out a letter. His handwriting was the same as when he was little, neat but slightly slanted to the right. I pressed it against my chest before I started to read.
De hermana.
I hope you're doing well. I've been meaning to call, but things have been complicated. Monica and I have been having some differences, and I know she hasn't made it easy between you and me. My hands tightened on the paper. I read that line over and over again. There's something I want you to know, Mama. I didn't plan for you to miss my wedding. I wanted you there. I even bought a ticket to bring you to California, but Monica said it wasn't the right time. She said she wanted something simple, private. I didn't want to argue on our wedding day, so I agreed. But not having you there has haunted me every day since. The words blurred through my tears. I tried to keep reading, but I had to stop and breathe. He hadn't forgotten me. He wasn't heartless. He'd been controlled, silenced by love, or something pretending to be love. Mama, I know I haven't been the son you deserve. You gave me everything, and I let someone else decide how much space you should take in my life. I thought I was protecting my marriage, but I realized now I was abandoning the woman who protected me first. My chest burned. Every word felt like both healing and heartbreak. Monica doesn't like when I talk to you. She says you make me soft. She says you guilt-trip me and remind me too much of where I came from. But, Mama, that's the part of me I miss the most. By the time I finished reading, my tears had soaked the page. I folded the letter back carefully, held it against my heart, and whispered, "Thank you, Lord. My son is still in there somewhere." But there was more in that envelope. A small photo. It was of him holding his baby boy. The baby was maybe a year old, smiling with the same dimples his father had. Behind them, I could see a big house, white walls, glass doors, a garden that looked like a magazine cover. On the back of the photo, he'd written, "Meet Isaiah, your grandson. I'll bring him to see you soon. I promise." I pressed that photo to my lips. For the first time in a long while, I smiled from my soul. Weeks passed after that letter. No call yet, but the hope kept me breathing lighter. I'd sit every evening on that porch, rocking my chair, imagining a car pulling up with David holding my grandson. I even started knitting a small blue blanket with the name Isaiah stitched in the corner. But the visit never came. Instead, I received another letter, this time from Monica. Her handwriting was sharp, confident. Her tone, colder than the first breeze of winter.
Mama grace.
I know David wrote you recently. I found the letter. I need to make a few things clear. David has been under a lot of pressure. He doesn't need additional stress from the past. Please stop expecting visits or calls for now. We are trying to build our peace. I read that line 3 times. Stop expecting visits or calls. She wrote it like she was giving instructions to a stranger. At the end, she signed it. With respect, Monica. Respect? How do you spell respect with venom? I tore that letter in half. Not out of rage, but out of finality. That was the day I decided something inside me had to change. I realized I couldn't keep sitting, waiting for a knock that might never come. Months passed again, and silence returned. Until one morning I got another call, but not from David. It was from a woman named Tanya. She said she worked at the same firm as my son in Atlanta. "Ma'am, I'm sorry to bother you," she said softly. "I just thought you should know your son's been through a lot. He's separated from his wife." My breath caught. "Separated?" She continued. "He's been quiet at work. Doesn't talk much. But he keeps your picture on his desk. I thought you'd want to know that." I thanked her. And after I hung up, I cried. Not from sadness this time, but from something close to relief. Because God has a way of bringing truth to light, even when it takes years. A few days later, I received another call. This time it was David. "Mama," he said, his voice breaking. "I'm sorry." That's all it took. Those 2 words. He told me everything. How Monica had slowly turned him against me. How she'd made him believe I was clinging to the past. How she controlled every part of their life, his finances, his friends, even his phone. He said she'd thrown a fit the day he tried to buy me a ticket to the wedding. She told him, "You'll never be successful if you keep dragging your mother's small-town mindset into our life." He'd stayed silent to keep the peace. But silence is its own kind of betrayal. Then he said something that made my heart break all over again. She told me if I wanted to keep my family, I had to choose her or you. I didn't speak for a long time. When I finally did, all I said was, "You shouldn't have had to choose, baby. You just should have loved." He cried quietly on the phone. Said he missed home, missed me, missed the peace he used to feel sitting on our old porch in Birmingham. I told him, "Home never moved, David. You just walked too far away." A few weeks later he came. For the first time in almost 5 years, I saw my son standing at my door. He looked tired, thinner, older than he should have at 34. But when he smiled, I saw my boy again. The same one who used to run barefoot through puddles and ask me if rain was God's way of watering hope. He walked in and just stood there looking around the room. Everything was the same curtains, same pictures, same love. Then he broke down. He knelt right there on my kitchen floor and cried into my lap.
"Mana, I'm sorry."
I let her take everything good in me and twist it. I forgot who I was. I held his head and whispered, "You were never lost, son. You just needed to find your way back." We stayed like that for a long time. No words, just tears, forgiveness, and the kind of peace that doesn't come from people, but from grace. When he finally sat up, he pulled out his phone and showed me a photo of Isaiah. The boy was now 3. Big bright eyes, curls on his head, and a smile that melted my soul. "He asks about you," David said quietly. "He points at your picture and says, 'Grandma.'" I covered my mouth, shaking. "He knows me?" "He does," David whispered. "Even though she tried to erase you, he knows your name." That was all I needed to hear. 2 months later, he brought Isaiah to meet me. When that little boy ran into my arms, it felt like God himself had pressed reset on my heart. He smelled like baby lotion and sunlight. He looked up at me with those familiar eyes and said, "Grandma, Daddy says you pray a lot." I laughed softly.
"Ido, babe."
"And you're one of my biggest prayers come true." David watched us with tears in his eyes. He told me he'd filed for divorce. Said it wasn't easy, but peace was more important than pride. I didn't speak ill of Monica. I just said, let God handle her. Some lessons are best taught by silence. That evening, we sat on the porch, the 3 of us. Isaiah playing with a toy truck, David staring at the sky, me just breathing again. The same porch that once held my heartbreak, now held my healing. And I realized something that night. Sometimes the people who hurt you are just instruments in God's greater lesson. The morning after they left, I sat alone on the porch, rocking gently in my chair. The air felt lighter than it had in years. The birds were singing, the sky was clear, and my heart was finally still. For a long time, I had lived in silence, waiting, wondering, aching. But now I understood something. Healing doesn't always come from an apology. Sometimes it comes from finally seeing the truth. David started calling every week after that visit. Every Sunday evening, just before sunset, my phone would ring. "Mama," he'd say, "Isaiah wants to tell you something." And I'd hear that little voice shouting, "I love you, Grandma." Each call was like a piece of my soul being stitched back together. He'd tell me about his new job, how he was rebuilding his life from scratch, how therapy was helping him let go of the guilt. I'd listen quietly, then remind him, "Son, you don't owe me perfection. You just owe me presence." And he never missed a Sunday call again. A few months later, he brought Isaiah for a full weekend. We baked cookies, planted flowers, and watched old home videos on my dusty DVD player. Isaiah laughed seeing his daddy as a little boy, running around with chocolate all over his face. At one point, he looked up at me and said, "Grandma, were you there when Daddy was little?" I smiled, touching his curls. "Every single day, baby. I was there for all his firsts. His first steps, his first words, even his first heartbreak." He giggled. "You must love him a lot." I nodded, eyes misty. More than he'll ever fully understand. David just sat there, quiet, his eyes wet. He whispered, "Now I get it, Ma. Now I really do." Later that night, after I tucked Isaiah in, David came to the porch and sat beside me. The same spot where he used to sit as a teenager when life got hard. He said, "Mama, I thought success meant leaving everything behind. The small town, the old ways, even the people who raised me. But I see now, success means carrying love wherever you go." I smiled softly. "That's right, baby. Because love is the only thing that never loses its value." He looked down at his hands. "You forgave me so easily. After all I did." I turned to him and said, "Forgiveness isn't for you, David. It's for me. I needed to let go so my heart could breathe again. I can't carry yesterday's pain into tomorrow's blessings." He nodded, tears falling freely. And I reached over, taking his hand the same way I used to when he was little. We sat in silence for a while, the kind of silence that feels full, not empty. A few years passed like that, peaceful, simple, full of small miracles. Isaiah grew taller. David started volunteering at a mentorship program for boys without fathers. He told me, "I want to give what I almost lost." I started leading the women's group at church again. Every time I shared my story, someone would cry, not out of pity, but because they saw themselves in it. Mothers who'd been forgotten, sons who'd strayed, daughters who'd been shut out. I always told them the same thing. Don't chase those who walked away. Let God bring back what's meant to stay. Because sometimes losing them isn't punishment. It's preparation. One afternoon, I got a letter in the mail, this time from Monica. I almost threw it away, but something told me to read it. It was short. She wrote,
Mama grace.
"I know I caused you pain. I was wrong to keep David from you. I was afraid of losing control, but in the end I lost everything. I hope one day you can forgive me. Monica." I folded the letter quietly. And you know what? I forgave her right then. Because forgiveness doesn't mean you invite people back into your life. It means you release the power they once had over your peace. Now, some evenings I still sit on this porch, my little rocking chair creaking under me, the wind humming through the trees. Sometimes I close my eyes and think about everything that's happened. The pain, the silence, the letters, the reunion, the healing. And I realize every chapter had its purpose. If David had never left, he might never have learned humility. If Monica hadn't tried to erase me, maybe I'd never have learned how to stand on faith alone. And if I hadn't been broken, maybe I wouldn't have discovered how strong a mother's love truly is. People ask me how I survived it all. I tell them it wasn't strength. It was surrender. Because sometimes you survive not by fighting, but by letting God write the next page. So if you're listening to this, and you've been hurt by someone you love, if your child forgot you, if your family turned cold, if your kindness was met with distance, I want you to remember something. God still sees you. Every tear you cried in silence, every sleepless night you spent wondering, why me? Every moment you almost gave up.
He saw it.
And he was already preparing your restoration while you were still bleeding. Sometimes, losing them is how God saves you. Because not every door that closes is rejection. Some are protection. And when love comes back pure, healed, and whole, it's worth every lonely night that came before it. I still keep that first letter from David in my Bible. The paper's wrinkled now, but every time I read it, I'm reminded of one truth that never fails. A mother's love may bend. It may ache. It may cry quietly in the dark, but it never breaks. If you've ever been hurt by your own family, remember, God still sees your tears. Besties, if this story touched you, go on and tap subscribe and ring that bell. Leave me a line in the comments. Tell us where it hurt and where God helped. Share this with one person who needs hope today.